The rain poured heavily that night, the kind of storm that makes most people seek warmth and comfort. But for a young boy standing alone on a deserted street, there was no home to run to. He clutched a small, tattered bag to his chest, the only thing his parents had left him with before they disappeared. He didn't understand why they had left. One moment, he was sitting with them, laughing over dinner, and the next, they were gone, abandoned, alone. Fear and confusion washed over him, but deep inside, a spark of determination began to grow. "I'll survive," he whispered into the storm, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'll prove I'm worth something." Years later, that same boy stood at the top of a skyscraper he now owned. The name etched on the building was his, a symbol of the empire he had built from nothing. The world knew him as a billionaire, a visionary, a success story that defied all odds. But behind the headlines and the accolades was a journey no one could imagine, a journey of heartbreak, resilience, and unimaginable triumph. This is the story of a boy who turned his pain into power, his rejection into redemption, and the twist that changed everything? You won't believe how it all unfolded. His name was Ryan, a curious and kind-hearted 8-year-old with dreams as big as the sky. He loved drawing sketches of spaceships, imagining himself as a great explorer one day. His teachers often praised his creativity, and his classmates admired his cheerful nature. Ryan's world was filled with boundless imagination, and he believed his parents were his biggest cheerleaders. His mother, Elena, was a warm and nurturing woman who always had a smile for Ryan. She would sing him lullabies at night and encourage his artistic dreams. His father, Mark, was a hard-working man with a quiet demeanor, someone Ryan looked up to as his hero. Together they were his whole world, a small but happy family navigating life's challenges with love and resilience. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Mark's job at the factory was unstable, and the family often struggled to make ends meet. The bills piled up, arguments replaced laughter, and the warm home Ryan once knew began to feel colder. His parents tried to shield him from their troubles, but Ryan could sense the tension growing thicker with each passing day. One evening, as Ryan sat sketching in his room, he overheard his parents whispering in the kitchen. Their voices were low but filled with despair. "We can't keep this up," his father said. "There's no way out." His mother's sobs cut through the silence, and Ryan's heart sank. He didn't understand what they were talking about, but he knew it wasn't good. The next morning, everything changed. His parents packed a few belongings and told him they were going on a short trip. Ryan's excitement quickly turned to confusion as they drove him to a small, unfamiliar town. They stopped in front of a crowded bus station. "Wait here, sweetheart," his mother said, her voice trembling as she kissed his forehead. Ryan waited, clutching his sketch pad and looking around for his parents. Minutes turned into hours, and the bustling station began to quiet as people left for their destinations. Panic set in when he realized they weren't coming back. "Mom! Dad!" he called out, his voice breaking, but there was no answer. The weight of abandonment crashed down on him, and tears streamed down his face. Confusion turned to fear, and fear turned to heartbreak. Ryan sat alone on the cold bench, clutching his sketch pad as his mind raced. Why did they leave me? Was I not good enough? The questions swirled in his young mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The once bright world he had known was now shrouded in darkness. Ryan's first night alone at the bus station was one of the longest of his young life. The cold seeped into his bones as he curled up on the bench, clutching his sketch pad for comfort. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and the darkness around him felt suffocating. He tried to stay awake, fearful of what might happen if he closed his eyes. Morning brought no relief. Ryan wandered the streets of the unfamiliar town, his small legs aching from walking. He approached passers-by with timid questions. "Have you seen my parents? Do you know where they might have gone?" Most people shook their heads, offering pitying glances, while others ignored him entirely. His hope dwindled with each passing hour. As the day wore on, Ryan stumbled upon a small park and sat beneath a tree, exhausted and defeated. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him of the sandwich his mother had packed for him the day before. It was gone now, along with the life he once knew. He buried his face in his knees, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Hey, kid, are you okay?" A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Ryan looked up to see an elderly woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Her name was Margaret, a retired teacher who spent her afternoons feeding birds at the park. She crouched down to Ryan's level, holding out a bottle of water and a granola bar. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Ryan hesitated before mumbling, "Ryan." Margaret's heart ached as she listened to his story. She didn't press him for details, but offered him a safe place to stay for the night. "You can't be out here alone," she said firmly, taking his small hand in hers. Margaret's home was modest but cozy, filled with books, plants, and the scent of freshly baked bread. For the first time in days, Ryan felt a glimmer of safety. Margaret gave him clean clothes, a warm meal, and a soft bed to sleep in. He clutched his sketchpad tightly as he drifted off, feeling a sliver of hope for the first time since his parents left. Over the next few days, Margaret tried to contact local authorities to find Ryan's parents, but no records or leads turned up. She enrolled him in school and introduced him to a local youth counselor named Mr. Carter, who became an important figure in Ryan's life. Mr. Carter, a kind and patient man, encouraged Ryan to express his feelings through art. Despite the newfound support, Ryan struggled with feelings of worthlessness. He often wondered why his parents had abandoned him. "Was I not good enough?" he asked Margaret one evening, his voice barely audible. Margaret knelt beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. "Ryan, what your parents did says nothing about you. You are brave, talented, and kind. Never forget that." But Ryan couldn't shake the dark thoughts entirely. At school, he often felt like an outsider, avoiding eye contact with classmates who whispered about him. The teachers noticed his withdrawn demeanor, but Ryan was too afraid to open up. He poured his emotions into his sketches, creating vivid drawings that reflected his inner turmoil. One day, while walking home from school, Ryan passed an art studio with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. He hesitated before stepping inside, the smell of paint and canvas filling the air. The owner, Mr. Lewis, was a gruff but kind artist who immediately recognized Ryan's talent. "You've got something special, kid," he said after glancing at Ryan's sketchpad. "If you want, you can work here after school. I'll teach you a few things." Ryan's time at the art studio became a turning point. Under Mr. Lewis's mentorship, he honed his skills and gained confidence in his abilities. The studio became a refuge, a place where he could escape his pain and focus on creating something beautiful. But even as he improved, moments of doubt lingered. Late at night, Ryan would sit by his bedroom window, staring at the stars and wondering if his parents were doing the same. "Do they miss me?" he whispered to the night. "Do they even think about me?" The questions haunted him, but he channeled his pain into his art, each stroke of the pencil a step toward healing. Margaret and Mr. Carter noticed the change in Ryan. He smiled more often, laughed occasionally, and even started making friends at school. But the scars of abandonment remained, a silent reminder of the battles he had fought and the strength he had found within himself. Ryan's turning point came one quiet afternoon at the art studio. He was sketching a portrait, his strokes careful and deliberate, when Mr. Lewis stopped behind him and said, "You're better than you think, kid." Have you ever thought about selling your work? Ryan blinked, the question catching him off guard. Selling? Who would buy my sketches? He asked hesitantly. Mr. Lewis chuckled. You'd be surprised. People love art that tells a story, and yours does. The seed of an idea took root in Ryan's mind. For the first time, he saw his talent as more than a hobby. It could be his way forward. That evening, as he stared at his sketches spread out on his desk, he made a decision. I'm going to make something of myself, he whispered to the empty room. Not for anyone else, but for me. Ryan began to pour himself into his art like never before. He experimented with colors, styles, and mediums, spending hours at the studio and at home. His hands were often smudged with charcoal or paint, and his notebooks filled with sketches and ideas. But art wasn't his only focus. Ryan knew that to succeed, he needed knowledge. He borrowed business books from the library, learning about marketing, finances, and branding. The more he read, the more he realized that success wasn't just about talent. It was about strategy. One day, Ryan approached Mr. Lewis with a proposal. What if we held an art show here at the studio? He asked, his voice filled with nervous excitement. Mr. Lewis raised an eyebrow but smiled. Why not? Let's do it. The weeks leading up to the art show were some of the hardest of Ryan's life. He balanced school, part-time work at the studio, and hours of painting. Sleep became a luxury, but he didn't mind. Each completed piece felt like a small victory. Margaret and Mr. Carter supported him every step of the way. Margaret helped him frame his artwork, while Mr. Carter offered advice on presentation and storytelling. Every piece needs a story, Mr. Carter said. People don't just buy art, they buy the emotion behind it. Ryan took the advice to heart. He added small notes next to each painting, describing what inspired them. One piece, a vivid depiction of a stormy night, was titled The Night They Left. The description read, "This painting reflects the pain of being abandoned and the strength it takes to keep going." The night of the art show finally arrived. Ryan stood nervously at the entrance of the studio, watching as people trickled in. He had worn his best shirt and combed his hair, but his hands still trembled. "What if no one likes my work?" he whispered to Margaret. She smiled and squeezed his shoulder. "They will, Ryan, trust me." As the evening unfolded, Ryan's fears began to fade. People stopped to admire his paintings, asking questions about his process and inspiration. To his surprise, several pieces sold within the first hour. One couple purchased The Night They Left for a significant sum, leaving Ryan speechless. By the end of the night, nearly half of his paintings had sold. Mr. Lewis patted him on the back, his grin wide. "See? I told you people would love your work," he said. Ryan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. The success of the art show was just the beginning. Word spread about the talented young artist, and Ryan began receiving requests for commissioned pieces. Each project brought new challenges, but Ryan embraced them, using every opportunity to grow and improve. His confidence grew with each small victory. He no longer saw himself as the boy who was abandoned, but as someone who had the power to shape his own future. The scars of his past still lingered, but they no longer defined him. Ryan's breakthrough came 5 years after that first art show. By then, he had built a small but growing reputation as a talented artist. His work had evolved, blending raw emotion with vibrant creativity, and his pieces were featured in several local galleries. One day, an email landed in his inbox that would change everything. It was from a prestigious international art festival, inviting Ryan to showcase his work alongside world-renowned artists. At first, he thought it was a mistake. "Why me?" he whispered, staring at the email in disbelief. But Margaret's encouraging words echoed in his mind. "You earned this, Ryan. Never doubt your worth." Ryan threw himself into preparing for the festival. He worked tirelessly, creating a series of paintings that told the story of his journey, from the pain of abandonment to the triumph of resilience. One painting, titled "The Lost Boy's Light," became the centerpiece of his collection. It depicted a small boy walking through a dark forest, guided by a single, glowing lantern. The festival was a whirlwind of excitement and nerves. Ryan stood in a grand exhibition hall, surrounded by his artwork, as people from all over the world admired his pieces. He overheard whispers of admiration, and his heart swelled with pride. By the end of the evening, Ryan's work had caught the attention of several prominent art collectors and critics. One collector approached him, offering to purchase his entire collection. "Your art speaks to the soul," she said. "It's authentic, raw, and unforgettable." That moment marked the beginning of Ryan's meteoric rise. With the proceeds from the sale, he opened his own studio and gallery, creating a space for emerging artists to showcase their work. He also launched an online platform, making his art accessible to people around the globe. Over time, Ryan's name became synonymous with innovation and resilience in the art world. His story of turning pain into purpose resonated deeply with audiences, and he was invited to speak at schools, conferences, and charity events. Despite his success, Ryan remained humble, always remembering the people who had helped him along the way. Ryan's life had transformed in ways he never imagined. He traveled the world, met inspiring individuals, and used his platform to advocate for causes close to his heart. Yet he never forgot the boy who had once sat alone on a cold bus station bench, clutching a sketch pad. In his luxurious but modestly decorated apartment, Ryan kept a small, worn-out sketch pad in a glass case. It was the same one he had carried on the night his parents left. Whenever he felt overwhelmed by the demands of his new life, he would look at it and remind himself of how far he had come. "Success isn't about forgetting where you started," Ryan often said in interviews. "It's about honoring your journey and using it to help others find their own light." The twist in Ryan's story came on an ordinary afternoon. He was hosting an open gallery event when a familiar face appeared in the crowd. His heart stopped as he locked eyes with the woman standing in the corner. It was his mother, Elena. She looked older, her once bright eyes shadowed with regret. Standing beside her was Mark, his father, who seemed smaller and more subdued than Ryan remembered. They approached him cautiously, their expressions a mix of hope and fear. "Ryan," Eleanor said, her voice trembling, "we've been following your work. We're so proud of you." Ryan's emotions surged, anger, sadness, and an unexpected wave of pity. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Why now?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. "Why come back after all these years?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "We were scared," she admitted. "We thought we were doing what was best for you. But we were wrong, and we've regretted it every day since." Mark stepped forward, his voice low. "We're not here to make excuses, son. We just wanted to see you, to say we're sorry." Ryan's gaze softened, but his heart remained guarded. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said honestly, "but I've moved on. I've built a life for myself, and I'm proud of who I've become." The conversation ended on a bittersweet note. Ryan didn't offer them a place in his life, but he didn't turn them away entirely. "Maybe one day," he said as they left, "but not today." As they walked out of the gallery, Ryan turned back to his guests, his mind swirling with emotions. Despite the encounter, he felt a sense of closure he hadn't expected. He was no longer the abandoned boy seeking validation. He was Ryan, a self-made success, a beacon of resilience. Ryan stood in the quiet corner of the gallery, facing the two people he never thought he'd see again. His parents, Elena and Mark, stood before him, their expressions a mix of regret and hope. The bustling noise of the gallery faded into the background as the three of them exchanged a long, tense silence. "We've followed your work for years," Elena said, her voice trembling. "We're so proud of you, Ryan. You've become everything we always knew you could be." Ryan's chest tightened. Pride, from the very people who had left him to fend for himself. He took a deep breath, his emotions a swirling mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. "You left me," he said, his voice steady but laced with pain. "You abandoned me when I needed you most. Why?" Mark stepped forward, his shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of years of regret. "We thought we were doing what was best for you," he said softly. "We didn't have the resources to give you the life you deserved. We thought someone else could do better." Ryan's fists clenched at his sides. "So, you decided to let the world deal with me?" he said, his voice rising slightly. "Do you know what it was like, waiting for hours at that bus station, thinking you'd come back? Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Elena began to cry, covering her face with trembling hands. "We were wrong, Ryan. We made a terrible mistake, and not a day goes by that we don't regret it." Ryan's gaze softened slightly, but his heart remained guarded. "I've spent years rebuilding myself," he said. "Not because of you, but in spite of you. I had to find my own strength, my own worth, because the people who were supposed to believe in me didn't." The words hung heavy in the air. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again, as if realizing there was nothing he could say to erase the damage. Instead, he placed a hand on Elena's shoulder, his eyes filled with remorse. After a long pause, Ryan sighed deeply. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "But I'm not angry anymore. I've moved on. I've built a life for myself, and I'm proud of who I am. I don't need anything from you. Not anymore." Elena looked up, her tear-streaked face a picture of sorrow. "We don't deserve your forgiveness, but we wanted you to know how sorry we are. That's all." Ryan nodded, a small gesture that carried the weight of their complicated history. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "Maybe one day I'll be ready to forgive, but not today." As his parents turned to leave, Ryan felt an unexpected wave of closure wash over him. Watching them walk away, he realized he no longer needed their validation or presence to feel whole. He had found his own path, his own strength, and that was enough. Returning to the gallery, Ryan rejoined his guests, his emotions still swirling but his resolve stronger than ever. He had faced the people who had caused him the deepest pain and stayed true to himself. The chapter wasn't closed entirely, but for now it was enough. The days following the encounter with his parents were surprisingly calm. For years Ryan had carried the weight of their abandonment, the pain shaping much of who he was. But now, as he stood on the other side of the conversation, he felt a quiet strength. He realized that he wasn't defined by what had happened to him, but by how he had chosen to rise above it. Ryan continued to pour his heart into his art and his growing platform. He expanded his gallery to include a mentorship program for young, aspiring artists who faced challenges similar to his own. Every week he spent time with these students, sharing his journey and teaching them how to express their struggles through creativity. "Art saved me," he often said during these sessions. "And it can save you too. Don't let the world tell you who you are. You decide that." One of his students, a shy teenage girl named Mia, approached him after class one day. She held up a small painting she had worked on, her hands shaking. It was a vivid depiction of a broken heart mending itself with golden thread. "This is how I feel," she said quietly. Ryan smiled, recognizing himself in her. "It's beautiful," he said. "Never stop creating." Ryan's efforts didn't go unnoticed. His story of resilience and generosity inspired countless people, and he became a sought-after speaker at schools and community events. Standing on brightly lit stages, he shared the same message every time. Your past doesn't define you. Your determination does. It's not about where you come from. It's about where you're going. As Ryan spoke to packed auditoriums, his voice steady and full of conviction, he thought back to the boy he used to be, the one sitting alone at the bus station, clutching his sketch pad. That boy had found his light, and now he was determined to help others find theirs. If this story resonated with you, Ryan says, addressing the camera with a warm smile, remember that no matter where you start, it's your determination and choices that shape your future. Don't give up on yourself. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more uplifting stories like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing these journeys of hope and resilience. Your past doesn't define you. Your determination does.